Very good morning to one and all. I'm so excited for the session we're about to have, and I hope everyone is warm and well on this cold Monday morning. My name is Lungile. I'm an assistant public relations officer currently with the UKZN. Previously worked with Center for Creative Arts as a project coordinator and a publications officer. So it's really good to be back home. So our session this morning, I would like to call it an indie jam session with Khalid Jalalati, who is a screenwriter, director, and indie producer. Khalid's original film, Nandi, will be showcased at the Durban Film Festival this year. And so today's session, he will just be taking us through his experiences as an independent filmmaker, and also presents innovative models to production which are favorable to independent filmmakers, and will further share innovative ways of doing business in the world of film. But before I let Khalid take over, I'd just like to run through some house rules. Please keep your phones on silent or off during the session. Cell phones off during the session, or keep them on silent. If you have any comments, we have the chat room open to you, so you can just drop us comments there. If you have any questions, we're going to have a Q&A session at the end of his presentation. So if you have any questions, we also got the Q&A option for you there. If you hadn't gotten a chance to write something down while he's presenting his session, you can raise your hand at the end while we are having the Q&A session. I guess that's about it for the seriousness of Zoom. I would just like to welcome everybody and thank you to the Durban Film Festival for this session. I will let Khalid take over now. Thank you.
Hi, morning. How are you? Sorry, I'm a little late. I think COVID is making us all a little up late for everything. Well, thank you. I really appreciate it. And thank you everyone for joining in your time. I'm glad you called it a jam session and not, I remember we had this conversation about it being a masterclass, and I said, I don't know many masters yet. And I think we need a lot more time to get there, but hopefully we will. And I just want people to be a little more connected on that level with this on the ground. This is grassroots filmmaking. This is not about, a master doing anything like that, because I'm not. So just to start off, I just want to say, look, I'm going to run you through this session, this workshop, this idea. It's conversational. At any point, if you have a question, if you want to jump in, if there's something you want to say, just let me know and I'll engage with you on that. This is really kind of an introduction to where I come from. And the reason I want to do it like that is because I want people to understand that there isn't like this secret hand that comes down and picks you as to, who's going to be a filmmaker and who's not going to be a filmmaker. Anybody from any background, if you work hard enough, you'll get to where you need to be. And there's not one avenue. That's the most important thing to say. So I'm going to start by just sharing my screen. I wonder if I'm not sure on Team Viewer, I know you can't do full screen, so I'll try my best to just run you through this. Can you see this, Ngile? Okay, great. All right, so I'll just start off with the basic stuff, which is my introduction. So I'm a screenwriter, director, and indie producer. Indie is a term you guys are going to be hearing a lot during this session. I specialize in micro, to medium budget filmmaking. Budget conscious projects. That's really my goal. That's really my expertise. And that's what I want to promote here today, is that you don't need to wait or lean on anybody to get what you need to get done. So that's a big part of it. My background is, and this is kind of where these, and I'll run through these very quickly so we can do, because I'm better with Q&As and you can ask me a question and I'll respond. But basically, I have no background in film. So after matric, I had a friend, Charles Zwayo, who was going to film school, and I didn't even know there was such a thing as film school. I didn't know that people studied film. I thought film was something that that God would just be like, hey, listen, you are made for, like, God is making everything. God is shooting the film. God picks the actors. So what happened was he told me about film school, and I left law school. I actually left the registration office at Tux to go and register and study film. And I don't know why I did that, but I did. Dropped out a few months later because I just felt that, and this is a big conversation. I'm sometimes too transparent, and maybe it gets me into trouble, but it is what it is. So I'll just say what's on my mind and we can address those later. I think for me, one of the biggest issues I have with film schools in South Africa or across really is that they try to make crew members and not filmmakers. And I think there's a big difference between a crew member and a filmmaker. And I felt that I wasn't getting that. So I left and I started, I called everybody I knew and said, listen, if you know anyone who's looking for someone to assist on sets, I'll come, I'll help. You don't have to pay me. I don't have to do anything. I'll bring my own lunch. I'll get myself there. I'll eat an apple if I have to, but just let me come and learn. And for about 2 years, that's what I did. I just stayed and I learned and I watched and asked questions. And at some point, the Lebanese businessman in me took over a little, and I was like, okay, let me shoot. So I'm going to shoot these things. I'll shoot behind the scenes videos with my little camera. I'll cut them up and you can look at them. If you like them, you can buy them, right? But if you don't like them, tell me what's wrong. Tell me what you don't like about them. And that's what I ended up doing. And for 2 years, that's kind of how I balanced it. I worked on sets. I learned. And then I included this element of behind the scenes videos, and people started to, some would buy, mostly wouldn't. And then they would be like, oh, but I didn't like this. And this seems a little too thing. And that shot was bad or whatever. And that's kind of what I learned from that. But what I also learned from that, and what really, my research, I'm a learner. So I love to learn. I love to self-analyze. I always go back and back and back. And so what I picked up from that was the digital format. So the small budget, digital equipment, being able to turn around stuff very quickly. I learned that from being able to do that. And so I applied it to a business model where I started a company in 2009, and that dealt with mostly commercials. I started doing behind the scenes videos, started doing music videos, and then got into digital content pieces before anybody got into it. And everybody thought it was yucky back then when they were doing big budget TVCs. Excuse me. And I got into that and started offering companies. I said, look, at a fraction of what it would cost to make your commercial, I can do something similar, and it could be a little bit longer. It's obviously not going to have the production value, but it definitely will have the quality. And so that's where I started in terms of the industry, and it's been running ever since. Which led me to the mixtape filmmaking model, right? And what I've applied it to is I'm a big fan of hip hop, and I studied the kind of the 80s mixtape era of hip hop and the jazz, kind of this improv jazz idea. And I merged the two to create this kind of model, which is, it puts you in a space where you have to be self-sufficient. You have to be resourceful. There only can be a can-do attitude. That you can't get into a situation where you're like, well, I don't have the money to do this. There's always a way to do something. It might not be. You just have to manage your expectations, because it might not be, for example, having a jet fly overhead in the shot. You're not going to get that, but you can definitely get the shot of someone speaking, for example. So that's what it is. And then the competitiveness of hip hop, I really love. And I thought, it's something that we need in South Africa. We need to be able to compete with not each other on a filmmaking as a filmmaker, but to compete. The industry has to challenge each other. So we have to challenge from a format perspective, from story perspective. We have to challenge each other, and that's really the only way we will grow. So that's kind of the foundation of that for me. Like I said, I'm trying to adjust this, but I'm a big fan of learning, self-analyzing, going back to where you are, and then knowing where you are will help you kind of jumpstart or leapfrog forward. And I think for me, is understanding where the industry is right now is something that I put together, which I identify as mandate cinema, right? Mandate cinema is very kind of like a narrow view of what South African filmmakers should be doing. It's number one, films that come out of, funding houses that are very kind of checklist films. It's like, this is what it needs to be. And they have like maybe 15 script editors in the whole funding company. And what will happen is those 15 will essentially edit and structure every film very similarly. That's why you won't see anything new in the country, or mostly new in the country, not everything, because some people are doing good stuff. And so this is kind of where I feel the issues are, right? And again, I'm running through this very quickly. So to give you a context of a parallel industry that can exist, right? So production houses, I think the issue that we need to address with production houses is they make their money upfront, right? So they don't make their money from selling films, they make their money from production budgets. And the issue with that is they're not incentivized to push the film. They're not incentivized to market the film better or to get it as far as it can go, as well as the filmmakers. Then the filmmakers in turn are not incentivized to do a better job or to compete again, right? So that's the first thing. The exhibitors and the broadcasters, the fact that there's a monopoly on how you exhibit your film in the country is a problem. We have a big problem of filmmakers who have made films who will never be able to, I think the Bioscope, for example, is one of the very few ones in the country, and some in Cape Town. But really, as a young filmmaker who's your biggest asset is being able to sit down in front of an audience and have that audience say, I don't really like this. I don't know what the hell's going on. And that feedback is so important to a filmmaker. But we're not going to get that because no filmmaker who's made a film for under X amount of money is going to be able to go to New Metro, is going to be able to go to Ster-Kinekor, is going to be able to go to UIP. And any of those platforms are not going to keep the film on for longer than it takes for another American or foreign film to come in and take over, because they spend much more money, which is understandable to a certain point. They spend much more money. But that is a problem. That is a very big problem for the status of the film industry on the global scale. It's a big problem. The other thing is regulating price tickets. Regulating the price of tickets. I think it's ridiculous that I have to pay 100 Rand to go see an Avengers film and 100 Rand to go see a South African film. Obviously, as a viewer, if you step back and you look at it, as a viewer, I'm going to pick the 100 Rand, the Avengers film. I'm never going to choose a South African film, and I think South African films need to have priority in cinema, and I think every cinema needs to regulate to say, I need to have X amount of a percentage of films that are South African, and those films are priced differently to the international films because they didn't cost as much to make, and they didn't cost as much to market. So why should the pricing of those tickets be any different? And I think we need to incentivize. So the viewers, we need to incentivize the audiences. We need to incentivize them and meet them halfway. Number one, on the pricing and the structure of the industry, but also two, on the creative side. And then the lastly is the funding institutions. I just spoke about this a bit now, but basically, largely those institutions are not made up of film industry professionals. They're made up of accountants and people who manage money. And unfortunately, if you haven't been in the industry and you haven't managed the film production, or you haven't managed or produced the film and don't know the actual process of making a film, it's very difficult to sit in an office somewhere and make decisions about films, not knowing what it's like on the ground for filmmakers and for people who kind of have to manage budgets and sets and people and delays and all that good stuff. And the other part of it is because it's almost like mandate. So there's a budget that gets given out. That budget needs to be spent, and as long as that thing is spent and there's a checklist, a tick off of like, oh, it's been made, and the quality mostly isn't there, and that's an unfortunate thing that we have to say. But unfortunately, and for all of us, I mean myself included, it's not like I'm a genius, but there's no way I can make a film every 5 years, every 6 years, because there's not enough funding. The ecosystem of the industry isn't churning out, and to expect myself to be a great filmmaker, it's impossible. So what happens is it leaves the filmmakers without any accountability. As long as the companies are doing what they're supposed to do and filling in the forms they're supposed to fill in, and the funding houses or the funding organizations are also filling in their paperwork and doing what they're supposed to do, like the filmmaker is left out of that equation. It doesn't matter whether you make a good film or not, as long as you deliver the film on time and on budget or a little bit of it, doesn't matter. That's really kind of the problem we have, and it's going to continue to be the problem unless we start to debate these issues. Okay. On that note, so these are 3 films that I tried to make, feature films, self-funded, that all fell apart, and I think it's really important that we have these conversations, because a lot of people will show you kind of the final end result, but it's very difficult to tell you that I've been doing this now for 12 years. I've been in this industry for 12 years. When I say industry, I mean the production industry, commercials, everything. But the film side of it is very, very, I've been doing that on my own. I've been kind of exiled to the edges of the industry. And so I've tried to make these things on my own down with great actors, mind you, but it all fell apart. Every single one of them. Genius was my first one, didn't work. Alexa was my second one, and it taught me a lot about filmmaking. And there was some like sound issues and whatever, but I didn't learn that. I didn't learn that in school, in film school, because in film school, what they did is they would sit you down and say, you're about to start your career as a filmmaker, and then pull up, Steven Spielberg's Saving Private Ryan, the opening sequence of Saving Private Ryan. As someone who knows nothing about cinema or film or production or anything, that's a feat. That's a feat to try and reach. But if you sit me down and show me a Kevin Smith film or a John Sayles film or a John Hughes film, and it's mostly people kind of in rooms talking and engaging in character development, I can do that. I could definitely do that. And then you move on to the next thing, and you move on to the next thing, and you start to figure out your voice. But now this thing isn't this like foreign language to you. It's the language you understand. You can become better at it, but you understand it. And I think that's the most important thing. And it took me, unfortunately, 3 films. So by the time I got to Zian Hunley at the end of 2018, which fell apart, because of issues, one of the crew members, one of the cast members, a few days into production, got into an accident on another set, on a different production, and that obviously delayed our production, and then it put us in a situation where the main actors were going into shows and other films, and so the schedules were end of 2018, so the November 2018 to where it stopped. And we were only going to be able to shoot September 2019 at that point. And as a filmmaker, I think everybody who's a filmmaker can agree. It's, even from a business side, if you don't have a film, you're not a filmmaker. You are someone who is talking about your ideas. That's really what it comes down to. So I thought to myself, there's no way that I'm going to wait until 2019 to get this done. So I'll get to what I did, but to kind of give you some scope about the format before we carry on. So for indie filmmaking, and this is what I'm saying, like expectations. You need to understand what you want. You need to understand as a filmmaker what you want to do, how you want to do it. There is no way you can appeal to the indie format or the indie model and want to make an Avengers-style film. It's just not going to work. It's not for that. It's not built for that, but we need variety. And we're missing in South Africa, the industry is missing variety. It's missing people who are making sci-fi and horror and, musicals and rom-coms and telenovelas and serious miniseries and a bunch of things. But what we don't have right now is that. And this format allows for a different avenue. It allows you to go, you know what, I'm actually going to make a film. It's about people talking. It's about a relationship. It's about a woman who's going through something with someone and how does she deal with it? And you know what? It ends up X, Y, and Z, and that's the whole thing. So in terms of approaching it from this way, I think we need to have something that is, it's kind of an idea, which is we need to have an unreasonable amount of reasonability, which is, coming from a background that you don't know anything about anything, you can say, listen, I think I can do this, which is unreasonable because you've never done this before. And there's like, such a big separation of doing that. But reasonability is you also then need to be conscious of your expectations. Okay, so here's these are just some things that I picked up on in terms of the actual points of making films in this model, right? So keep your crew small. I think it's like a basic, it seems basic, but it really is like be strict about it. A lot of people say, okay, I'm gonna keep my crew small, and then they go from 5 people to 10 people to 20 people to 30 people. And before you know it, they've hired like a whole bunch of people and they're trying to manage that. I'm very, very strict about the amount of crew members I have. 10 crew members max. I'm talking sound, camera with some assist. Because you're never going to be doing like setups where you need, 6 people doing lights. There's no way you should do that. And if you do need to do that, if that's the case, hire them for that day. That's it. Like bring them in for half a day to do the lighting setup and then send them home. But stick to 10 people. Production days, very small production days, 10 days. I would say 10 to 15 days if you have a little bit of money, but 10 days and under if you don't. Because I'll tell you something, what you'll be able to do is you'll be able to access crew and cost because they will come. They'll help you for a few days. They'll help you for 5 days. They'll help you for 6 days, but they're not going to help you for 30 days. No one's going to take 30 days of their time, especially in an industry where everyone's trying to survive, to come in and help you on a smaller project. But if you say, look, I need you for 5 days and I'll split those 5 days over 2 different weeks. So this week it's Monday, Tuesday, next week it's Thursday, Friday. They will give you that. They'll give you their time. They'll find a way to do it. Actor focused projects. I mean, I don't really need to say much. Your actors always, unless you are a still photographer, your actors are everything to you as a filmmaker. If you get the right actors and you essentially solidify the concept around the actors, they will give you everything you need if you get the right actors, obviously. And it'll make the quality of the film feel a lot better than what it is. Something to say, you have to have something to say. These things have to be writer, director driven. Otherwise, they won't get over the line. No one trying to make, millions of rands is gonna try to make indie films because the reality is it's about the money and that's a big part of it. And I'll get to that separately. But if you have something to say and you're a small crew, your crew members, your cast members, you as a writer or a director or a producer will get it over the line one way or another. But if it's a business decision, at some point, if you can, you will walk away from it. Intimate storytelling. I mean, it really, I've mentioned it twice almost now, which is, you have to keep it tight. You have to keep it about people. You have to keep it about, even if you're dealing with fantasy. I mean, I'm not saying don't do fantasy, don't do sci-fi, don't do action films, but keep it tight. Keep it about the people in that story and not necessarily try to, expand on a world that you don't understand. Genre, and I've said it 3 times because it's that important. The basic format for me is, look, as a young filmmaker, genre is your friend. I know it's a bad word, but genre is your friend. Horror, action, crime, rom-com, comedy, musical, like whatever the genre you want to approach is, use that genre as a vehicle to get your point across. How you drive the car is up to you. Like as a filmmaker, how you drive the car is totally up to you. But pick a car that people are going to want to buy. And I'll tell you now, when it comes to film distributors and funders and whatever, for horror film, as an example, there's a track record of horror films that are made on small budgets that make their money back. You don't have to convince somebody. You don't have to say, listen, I want to make this film. For example, if what Chloe Zhao did, for example, with The Rider and then Nomadland. There's no real format for it. She created that format. And in doing it, like a test shoot one, the first one, and then she did the second one, she used that to kind of exercise, like, this is what I'm talking about, this is what I mean. And they were like, we don't know really what you're trying to say here. It feels like Terrence Malick, but it's not Terrence Malick. And so if you have something that's there already, as a filmmaker, you can approach someone with some money and say, listen, here's a track record, here are some films that have made the money back. Give me X amount and I'll make this film and deliver on time and on budget. And you will we'll find some way to sell this. So that's the other thing. Practical lighting. I'm a huge fan of practical lighting. I think there's what I do, and this I won't read this whole thing to you, but what I do is I set up a scene where I can shoot 360. It saves you a lot of time as a filmmaker, and it allows your actors to do a lot, and you can get a lot of setups in different ways without wasting time. So what I do is I'll create one main lighting source that I'm going to use in the practical space. So I'll say, okay, cool, I'm going to use an LED, even if it's non-practical lighting. And that LED doesn't move, but it becomes kind of the steady source of light. And then what I'll do is move lamps around the room or a small LED with the camera to move around. That's practical lighting. You don't have to change the lighting every time there's a setup or change the direction of you can do whatever you want. And it allows the actors a lot of freedom to work as well. Sorry, I'm rushing through this because I know I was late as well. Okay, this one is a big one. A lot of people are like, oh, I need to get the red, I need to get the RE, and I need to get the this and the that in 6K, 8K. Most DSLR cameras right now are shooting 4K. It's more than enough for any indie filmmaker. Most people don't exhibit in anything over 1080, ProRes essentially. So don't worry about that. If you're going to spend your money, if you're going to spend your time and your effort, spend it on lenses. A great lens will give you texture, it'll give you tone, it'll give you a look, it'll give you, especially cinematic, if you're going for cinematic look. Pick the right lens, it'll give you, even your voice, it'll give your voice more foundation in the story. And you're not worried about spending a lot of money because a lot of these things, 6K, 8K, it comes with a lot of requirements. You have to set up for dumping and ditting and all this other stuff. Whereas if you shoot on 4K, but you have great lenses, I think you'll get far. No shorts. So this is a controversial one. I don't like shorts. Personally, for me, I feel as a filmmaker, you have to be sustainable. You have to be fiscally responsible and sustainable. That's the only way you can have a long career. Longevity is by being able to sustain yourself. And making short films is great exercise. I've made 2. I made them myself when I was young, when I first was trying to figure out how to make films. I was the actor, I was the cameraman, I was the editor, I was the writer, I set up the lights, I was by myself. I did everything as a learning exercise, but I would not spend 5 days shooting a short film. That's me personally. I think I would just add a few more pages and make it a feature, because if it goes to TV or if it goes to a VOD platform or anything like that, you can make money off it, even if it's small budget. Right? But again, you have to be intentional and you have to understand what you want to do. I would never spend money on a short film in my experience. I know some people will disagree with me, but that's just me, and for those reasons. Okay. It's connected to the short film conversation. So a pound of flesh, every person who makes a film, even if you're putting up the money yourself, you have to be accountable for the money you put up. I personally, as my model right now in the mixtape filmmaking model, I don't accept anything over 1.5, 2 million max, because there's a 1.5 million rand. And that's like very big budget. In that scenario, I can make that money back. I can make 2 million rand back in local and foreign. But a 5 to 10 million rand film, where hardly anybody's making their money back. And for me, it's important that I can sit down and say, every film I've made thus far has made its money back. It's made its money back because I know what the film is. I know what the budget is ahead of time. I know, look, I'm not going to spend 3 million to make a film about 2 people talking. It's craziness. There's no need for that at all. 1.5, 2 million rand, you know what your stories are. Now, if you want to start getting to the bigger productions, that's a whole different conversation that I can have with you at a later stage. But, for now, I'm sticking to the indie. So this is why it's important to make sure that you're fiscally accountable to yourself or to the funder. Because if you go, so for example, my first film, which I'll run you through it now, Aya, I made my first film for X amount of money, right? I sold it, I immediately made my money back. And then I licensed, but I control it. I control everything. I didn't make it for so much money that if I don't sell it, it's going to break me. So what I did is I sold it and I licensed it for a short-term period, because I said, no, I'm not giving it to you for X amount of years. I'm giving it to you for 1 year, for example. And then after that 1 year, they had to relicense it. So that was another payment. And after the second year, they had to relicense it. That's the third payment. And basically, that's just one film. And I'm going to be able to do that with that film until the fat lady sings, essentially. And then forwarding. This is really important. So this is something I'm getting into now, which is a different form of distribution. I love, again, to go with the mixtape filmmaking model is really creating a mixtape, right? So creating a visual mixtape. And what you do with a mixtape is you tour it, like a band would tour an album or a hip hop artist would tour an album and do gigs. Do that. Make your film because it's small, because you control it. You go out and you book a restaurant, for example, and you say, okay, listen, restaurant, I'm going to pre-sell tickets. And those tickets will be $100 like they do in the cinema, but people will also be allowed to get a meal, and then the drinks they can pay for separately. While we're doing that, I'll put up the film and showcase the film. Or rent a small park or a playground and showcase the film on a screen. You can do that. And what you're doing is you're touring your film, and in doing so, we're opening up the market. We'll be opening up the distribution market in the country, and which will allow young filmmakers who don't have access to those platforms to make a film knowing that they can show it somewhere. So these are now the where we are now. So from 2018, when I told you end of 2018, the film fell apart, Zian Hanley. Luckily, I had a good wife who was like, get off your ass and go do something. And I wrote Aya in a couple of days. And I made that. So I wrote it on a Thursday and a Friday. I sent it out to the cast on Saturday. That Monday, we started pre-prod. So Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, we pre-prod. That following Friday, so within 10 days, we were shooting the film. And we shot it over a Friday, Saturday, and a Sunday. And we ended up with a feature film that Monday morning. Well, at least enough footage for a feature film. And we went into post and cut the film. And that went to Durban and went to 6 other film festivals. And I ended up selling it to Showmax. 4 people, there's 4 actors in the film, not more than 4. We shot all on DSLR cameras. It wasn't anything crazy, and it was a good film. Well, I'm proud of it. I'm proud of the actors. And it was the first step in terms of moving in that direction. Nandi was another one that we did, which was supposed to go to Durban. Unfortunately, that got changed, and I think that conversation is a different one. But that we made, again, still, I can't talk too much on that because I partnered with some producers on that from Cannabis Films. And then Olivia, I made myself. So I made right after Nandi, I made Olivia, which was another short-term filmmaking, which was, I think it was 4 days. And it was, again, a few amount of actors. It's a horror genre. It's like very genre-based horror thriller, like psychological thriller. And that also I'm preparing to sell now. And yeah, so that I've made since beginning of 2019 till today. We've made 3 films under this format and more with other people's projects and work in documentaries and series. I did like a docu-series, which was a 5-episode documentary series with someone else. And we did a TV show, which was a talk show. The format can adjust, and we were able to do that all on the kind of the micro budget format. And yeah, I just wanted to show you this so you guys have an idea of the possibilities. And just to kind of round it off with why go indie, right? And why it's important. And I think, for me, if I can kind of just speak freely, filmmaking is such a unique process because what it does is it forces people to have to come together and rely on each other to tell stories that are larger than life, to really do something that is bigger than yourself. And it's so important because if you have that format, if you have the indie format, young people, and this is, I think, something that we're missing here in South Africa is young filmmakers. And it doesn't have to be young, I mean, as in youth. I mean, young as in even in the state. Because unfortunately here we have a thing where if you haven't assisted for 5-10 years, you're not allowed to be put next to a camera or in front of camera or whatever the case is. I think that's craziness. I think if filmmaking is an art form, artists can be a 19-year-old with an idea or a 50-year-old with an idea. It doesn't change. And archiving our moments, being, we get to kind of leave these behind for generations to come about what's happening. What is happening right now in South Africa is a perfect example of, who's archiving those moments, who's recording that history, who's putting that down on film. Who's gonna be leaving this message for someone in the future to look back on and say, oh, that's what it was like to be an 18, a 20, a 30-year-old at that time in South Africa during 2021. So it's really important for those reasons. And then the ecosystem. We need to really build this ecosystem. It's very one-dimensional right now, and it's very much about the established companies and not the developing companies, and whether it's companies, production houses, or individual filmmakers, but it's all about the established, because the reality is all these funding houses, and not to seem like I'm bitter or complaining, but if you're someone who has to, for example, catch a cab to print a document, and most companies have an accounts department who do all their documentation. It's not fair for young filmmakers to have to compete on the same level. You have to give them a different tier. And when I say different tier, I mean treat it differently. Don't just say tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. You have to treat it as a different tier. And that's really kind of the overall presentation that I have for today.
Thank you so much, Khalid, for that. I see we have a question already from Kibare Juguna, who's asking if you make use of any share sites like Film Hub. So I think that's one we have for now. If you can just tackle that and then we'll circle back.
Okay, so share sites like Film Hub in terms of what, like putting up the film. Look, I think there's more than enough, for me personally, there's more than enough platforms right now. I wouldn't say Netflix, because Netflix isn't really talking to young filmmakers. They're talking to more production companies who are established and have a track record. And it makes sense. I mean, they can't really speak to thousands of producers at one time, especially that they don't have an established office in South Africa. But Showmax is a perfect example. Amazon is another one, because people don't approach Amazon. Not a lot of people approach Amazon. But there's more than enough platforms. I would do, for example, there's the Vimeo where you can upload your film and charge per viewing. I mean, if only 1,000 people see it and you charge them, 50 Rand to see it, that's 1,000 people paying 50 Rand each. You're making chunks back, and you have to understand how to do that, promote, market. So that's kind of my view on that. And TV is looking for content, because now TV is realizing that those VOD platforms, what they're doing is they're churning out content like regularly, and TV doesn't have that. So now they're looking to be like, oh, I need a 60-minute film, and as a filmmaker, 60 minutes is perfect. Yeah.
Tuli would like to know if you can kindly advise on various ways to raise funds as an indie filmmaker.
Sure. So it's a balance between raising money and resources, right? And I think resources are more important. So I'll give you an idea. So with locations, for example, I'll go to a location and I'll say, listen, let me use your restaurant for 2 days of shooting, right? Those 2 days of shooting is worth X amount, and make it cheap. Don't go too high. Say, look, what I'm going to do then in return is I'm going to shoot for you a 1 minute or 90-second commercial or promotion video that you can post up on social media, and there's a bartering system there. So that's one of the ways to do it. In terms of raising capital, I would approach a company and say, look, let me shoot. So I would do that for like advertising agencies or small companies. I really don't have a specific route. There's like so many different ways to, and it's not easy. So please don't put that past, but it's not easy to raise funds. But there's always a way to kind of be like, oh, I'll do this for you. Like, I'll use my skill set. I'll do this job for you. That payment will be for my film production. So you don't account that into your livelihood or whatever. And I know that's difficult, but it's kind of the course we chose. So those are the things. That's really the only advice I have for that.
We also have a question from Khalid. If you can please stop sharing the screen.
Oh. Okay, hold on.
Thank you.
Stop sharing. Here we go. Cool.
We also have a question from Lee, who's asking, have you dealt with location filming agreements for your work? Yeah,
I have. Look, so over the years, what I've done is I've consolidated a bunch of documents. For me, it's important to have your contracts in order. It's important to have your documents in order. But don't, again, I don't have an accounts department. I don't have a legal department. It's me. I am the producer. I am the director. I am the writer. And I have a team that I work with, which are all here, by the way. And I get what I need done, but it's never a thing of like contracts and stuff. So I have, what do they call it? I have templates. If you want, share the details with me. I can share them with you, Lungile, if they want. And, we can kind of give it out to people and send them a link to share and whatever the case is. So I'm happy to share from casting all the way from like scripting, casting, locations, everything. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for that. And we have another question from Happiness, who is asking, do you distribute your own content? How easy is it for an indie filmmaker to secure sales and distribution deals with specialists in the field?
Yeah, I do. I do distribute my own content. I produce them, so I always end up mostly having the conversations. Platforms are always looking for content and material content. It's the two different words, two different understandings, but they are always looking for content because they have to fill their schedule. And the thing that they have is, the only thing they have to compete with is being able to provide access to material more than the other platform. That's kind of their selling model. So they're always looking for good content. I would say just make a film that's good. And when I say good, I don't mean personally, because I might make a film that you think is not good, and you might make a film that I think is not good, but quality. right? Quality is the important thing. So if you make something of quality, you can find Showmax, different platforms, SABC, not so much now, but ETV is now looking, Mnet's always looking. So you can use those. And if you own them, you can really have that conversation over email, because you don't have to go through a massive thing of like, oh, I need to speak to my producer, or I need to speak to that person. It's yours.
And then we have a question from Kibari again, who's asking, can I pilot a documentary idea as a podcast initially, then use that to raise funds?
Yeah, I think it's always good to expand. So I'll give you an idea, and then you can kind of use that format. But what I do, for example, is I have a pilot for a show, for example, that I'm working on, and I'm shooting it. It's a 1 hour pilot, and I'm shooting it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to sell it as a film. I'm going to send it to festivals as a film, as a way to promote the show, right? And then once it's done, I can then use it as the pilot episode, whether I reshoot or I kind of rewrite it a bit, but always try to like make double use of your assets, of your content. So if you're going to do a podcast, I think it's great to start to market the show, do some visuals along with it, or just shoot it. I mean, if you're going to shoot it as a short form, I can't remember if he said what the format was, but even if you're going to shoot it as a short form, shoot it as a short film or a short episode, and then promote it as a short film in festivals. It'll start to get you as a filmmaker promotion, and it'll start to get the actual show or the content promotion. And then you can leverage that to get into conversations ahead of time. So you say, look, my film is doing well in the show. I want to turn it into a series. Give me money, or at least give me a deal. Give me a deal on paper, and I can go out and say, hey, listen, funder, I've got a guarantee that I'm going to be able to get this film on Showmax or whatever. And so will you give me some money to make this thing? So you just leverage the resources you have.
Thank you, Khalid. We have another question from Anonymous, who's asking, how do you make bread and butter or cash flow between projects without becoming just a crew member, especially if you want to be a film director, which means there's no ladder to climb, or you have to build your own ladder?
Yeah, I feel for you. So I'm with you, Anonymous. It's difficult. It is difficult. But what I do is, unfortunately, my bread and butter is commercials. I make commercials and brand films on a regular basis. And until I'm able to do this holistically, which I know is difficult for even, established companies that do commercials to survive. So I can understand your struggle. And this is the issue. This is what we're talking about, Lingili, which is people like this don't have an avenue. And they submit their projects and essentially they have to be as good as the established companies to get acknowledged by any funding organization, not to name anyone specifically. But they're never going to do that. But they're never also going to learn. There's never going to be an opportunity for that person that just spoke now, Anonymous, to say, look, actually this idea that I had didn't work, but this is why it didn't work, because of this and that. He's never going to be able to do that, or she's never going to be able to do that. And that's the sad part of it.
I think I have a question along Anonymous' question, which is, I've heard a lot that I don't know if this is a myth, so I think you are well equipped to let us know if this is true or not. Making money seems to be very difficult for independent filmmakers, and people believe that selling your work to international markets, foreign markets, will bring in more money than just doing it here in the country. What do you feel about that?
Well, two different things. I agree with one extent that it's going to bring in more money, but because of the rand to dollar or pound value. So if you make a film for R1 million and an overseas company pays $200,000 for it, that's 2.5 million rand essentially, more or less. So yes, there is more, but also remember it's about budgets. So keep your budget small, and you can sell locally and make money. Like I make money off my films locally because I make them on a medium budget. I kind of keep the budget conscious, and I get my returns back, and I'm able to license them over and over again. So just keep that in mind, and that might help. And obviously, the more assets you create, so the more material you create, the more things you can license. And I know it's a catch-22 because it's not like you can produce a lot with little anyway, but that's my only advice. Yeah.
I'd like to step away from the funding for like a second.
Yeah, please.
Khalid, you were
That's the sad part.
you were raised between two cultures. So I just wanted to find out, how has that experience for you influenced your body of work? And also, you said you are influenced a lot by classic cinema. So can you just elaborate on that when it comes to the body of work you do, especially in filmmaking?
Sure. I mean, obviously it affects it because I have two different perspectives and two different ideas, and they're always kind of like conflicting. The Lebanese, my Lebanese background, spent a lot of time there. All my family's there. And that's maybe why you pick up on a little accent as well. And obviously South Africa, where, I was raised here and I spent, most of my life here as well. It affects the way I look at things, and it affects the way I perceive things. And it also affects the way I look at the stories I want to explore. I'm not really good at talking about my process. It's something I think is weird, but from a kind of the selecting of films and why and how, I like to explore. So I use my films as a way to explore subjects. So if I'm talking about human trafficking, I don't know a lot about human trafficking, but I want to explore it on an intimate level. I want to explore it on the level of the victims and not necessarily like a Liam Neeson style action film. I want to say, okay, what does this person go through in that 24 hours where she's just held and nothing else? And that's kind of that's what I use film for. Everybody has different reasons, but that's mine.
Just trying to see if we have any more questions. Okay, Kibari would like to know how they can reach you if they have anything to run past you after the session. So maybe if you can share your, or I can ask the team at the Durban Film Festival to share on their page as well, your contacts.
Sure, yeah, happy to do that. If any way I can help you.
I think that's all the questions we have for now. I don't know if you have any closing remarks, Khalid, for all the questions that you've received so far.
No, I think don't wait on anybody. Don't wait, because if you wait, they're never gonna help. That's the reality. That's what I've faced for years and years and years. I tried to, can I and should I, and just do what you need to do. And as you grow, like the Anonymous was saying, there's no ladder you can climb, unfortunately. So it doesn't matter how hard you work. For certain people with culture ceilings, like certain people who don't have access to the resources, certain communities, you're not going to get an opportunity, unfortunately. So push yourself, do what you need to do. And I'm happy to help. Anybody has any questions, anybody needs anything that I can do, I'm happy to do so.
That's very insightful, Khalid. I have one more question before we close the session. Tuli is asking, how do we approach companies for product placement in our movies? So I think because you mentioned you do a lot of commercial stuff, how can that be achieved?
So I would say on a lower level, so if you're talking about approaching, for example, like an alcohol brand, they're very different because the scale of them is big, and they're not going to approach your film with much respect. That's the reality. A lot of this industry don't respect the younger filmmakers, or when I say younger, I mean in terms of experience, or the creative. Really, there's no respect for any of that. It's more about the bottom line across the board. So what I would say is approach a brand that is manageable. So, for example, someone who's doing, I'll give you an idea. And again, I only use references because I've done it, so I can tell you, and then you can apply it. But we approached, for example, one of the films we did, we approached a clothing brand. And we said, listen, maybe not funding, but if you give us the wardrobe for our film, we will shoot a little piece for you. And then we will have your clothes, because it was a specific brand. We will represent the brand, not like a commercial in the movie, but you'll see the branding. It'll be a part of the nature of the film, so it'll be natural, feel organic, it'll feel authentic, but it won't be like a direct commercial. Or you can have a commercial, like a 60-second commercial that we can share with you. And then we ended up getting all the wardrobe for our clients. I mean, for our actors and the through that way. So if they want to do something like that, I would approach a brand that's accessible. So someone that you can speak to the owner, someone that you can speak to the manager directly, and not someone who's like, oh, here's an email you can email to email someone else to email someone else. That's never going to work. Rather speak to someone that you can get in the room with and say, look, here's my pitch. This is what I want to do. This is what I can do for your brand. And this is what you can do for me. And at the very least, you get a, no, I'm not interested, and you move on to the next one. But if you spend like 6 months trying to get to the, marketing manager of a certain brand, you're never going to get there. So rather focus on brands that are accessible, and then also correlate with the budget level you're working with. So if you're going to make a small film about, two young kids who, bunk school to buy their new sneakers, when you shoot that sneaker, like shoot it almost like holy and like really beautifully lit. And that's branding, but they'll give you the rest of the clothes for everything else. You know what I mean? So something that's not as big from their brand for something else. So that kind of stuff.
Thank you so much, Khalid. We've learned so much from you.
Thank you.
And the work that you do. We appreciate you taking time out to talk to us.
Thank you.
The chat room is going crazy. People thanking you for the advice.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for taking time to listen.
Thank you so much. Thank you to all those who attended today. And I hope all your questions were answered. Like Kelly said, the Durban Film Festival is going to share some of his contacts. And if you have further questions, then you can take it off this session. But thank you so much for coming through, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, guys.